Look closely at this breathtaking, crystal-clear blue sky. Right below lies what appears to be one of the most magnificent, incredibly peaceful lakes hidden entirely within the massive Rocky Mountains. The calm water shimmers like a perfect, brilliant emerald directly under the bright morning sunlight. It is the exact kind of picture-perfect, majestic scenery that demands your immediate attention. You might even imagine flocks of wild birds circling gracefully in the fresh, crisp mountain air right above. It looks completely pure, entirely untouched, and utterly flawless in every single way. But wait just a moment. Stop the music completely right here, because the terrifying, heavily guarded truth is that absolutely no bird is ever allowed to land anywhere near this inviting water. If a tired, wandering bird makes the fatal mistake of touching that beautiful emerald surface, it dies instantly. This is officially the most dangerously toxic body of water in the entire nation. This is the dark, deeply twisted story of exactly how unchecked human ambition managed to transform a glorious natural landscape into a literal nightmare of unfathomable and completely irreversible environmental destruction. However, the tragic story does not simply end with endless death and complete devastation, because somehow, humanity is right now discovering an unimaginable, highly valuable treasure hidden deep within this toxic hell. Teams of highly specialized researchers are bravely entering this extreme environment. They are extracting something so incredibly rare and incredibly precious that it could easily shift the balance of global power forever. Before we dive deeply into the unbelievable scientific truth of this place, we must examine three vital, utterly shocking questions that will completely change your perspective on environmental disasters and modern science. Question number 1. What specific, absolutely horrifying sequence of tragic events caused nearly 4,000 migrating snow geese to drop dead out of the sky in one single, terrible rainy night? Question number 2. Why is the National Defense Department currently pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into extracting strategic materials directly from this highly acidic, extremely deadly, and deeply poisonous pit? And the final, absolutely most mind-bending question of them all: how could a bizarre, mutated, microscopic fungus surviving perfectly inside this intense poison possibly hold the ultimate key to defeating cancer? Stick around until the very end, because the answers to these seemingly impossible mysteries reveal a deeply shocking truth about our past, our relentless greed, and the strange, resilient nature of life itself. To truly understand how this massive nightmare was born, we must first travel back in time. We need to visit a place called Butte, Montana, but not just as a city. We must view this place as a living, breathing, and deeply ambitious character. Butte was never just a normal, quiet, little mountain town. It was an absolute industrial titan. During the late 19th century, this place was incredibly wealthy. It was actually the largest, most bustling city situated anywhere west of the massive Mississippi River, outranking even Seattle. In the 1890s, an incredibly tiny area of land, measuring only 5 square miles, produced over 26% of the entire world's supply of raw, valuable copper. That same tiny patch of rocky earth simultaneously satisfied over 51% of the total copper demand for the entire United States of America during a crucial era. Let us put this staggering scale into proper perspective. The total historical amount of copper pulled from the Butte area equals roughly 21 billion pounds of heavy, solid metal. To visualize that enormous number, imagine taking all that copper and building a massive, solid metal highway, fully 4 lanes wide and exactly 2 inches thick, across the country. That gleaming copper road would stretch continuously all the way from Chicago directly to New York City, with plenty of extra metal left over stretching into Long Island. By the year 1917, the booming population of Butte reached an absolute peak of 100,000 residents. It was a chaotic, crowded, and endlessly wealthy boomtown. There were over 450 underground mines operating simultaneously. The relentless noise of heavy hammers, deafening explosives, and massive steam engines echoed constantly through the dusty air. The grueling labor and heavy machinery simply never stopped. The intense mining operations ran continuously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, feeding an insatiable global hunger. But the fatal turning point, the true seed of this terrible disaster, arrived in the year 1955. The mighty Anaconda Company made a ruthless, highly profitable business decision. They decided to completely transition away from traditional underground tunnels. Instead, they began massive open pit mining, a method that was vastly cheaper, highly efficient, but incredibly brutal. To dig this gigantic hole, they literally bulldozed entire thriving residential neighborhoods right off the map. Historic communities like Meterville and Dublin Gulch were completely erased overnight without hesitation. But human greed always has a limit. In the year 1982, global copper prices completely collapsed. The massive company suddenly shut down the heavy machinery and walked away. They turned off the massive water pumps, the very same vital pumps that had kept underground water from flooding the deep mine shafts for 27 consecutive, incredibly busy years. The thousands of tired workers all went home. The giant steel gates were permanently closed. And then, the dark, silent underground water slowly, inevitably began to rise up. Everyone involved genuinely thought the worst part was completely over. They believed the ugly scar would just sit there quietly. But they were all so incredibly, tragically wrong. Because as the rising groundwater flooded into that massive open pit, something terrifying started happening deep inside the earth. A dark, unseen chemical reaction began silently cooking in the shadows. Nobody ever anticipated this deeply unnatural, horrifying process, and it slowly transformed that empty hole into a living, toxic nightmare far worse than any ordinary hazardous waste dump. The steep, rocky walls surrounding this massive pit are completely packed with a naturally occurring mineral officially called iron pyrite. The optimistic local miners playfully called it fool's gold because it shines and glitters brightly, looking exactly like real, valuable gold. While buried safely deep underground, away from oxygen, this mineral is completely harmless to the surrounding environment. But when that rising groundwater finally flooded in and touched the open air, a catastrophic chain reaction was instantly triggered. Rock plus air plus water creates highly concentrated sulfuric acid. This means the massive crater does not just merely hold toxic water. It is a terrifying natural chemical reactor that is continuously manufacturing fresh acid every single day. The toxic pit is quite literally eating its own rocky walls. The shocking results of this unnatural brewing process over more than 40 years are absolutely terrifying to witness. The acidity level of this lake continuously fluctuates between 2.5 and 3.7. That makes it significantly more acidic than black coffee or even pure lemon juice. But unlike innocent lemon juice, this horrific water is heavily loaded with dissolved copper, iron, arsenic, cadmium, zinc, and deadly lead at completely unprecedented, incredibly dangerous concentration levels. The toxic mixture is so incredibly aggressive that it can completely dissolve and eat through the solid metal propeller of a thick steel boat in just a few short hours. Currently, the total volume of poisonous water sitting inside this pit is estimated between 40 and 50 billion gallons. Let us put that mind-boggling volume into perspective. That is enough toxic liquid to completely fill up more than 75,000 massive Olympic-sized swimming pools, all lined up perfectly side by side, stretching across the horizon. But numbers alone cannot make you truly feel the devastating toxicity. For that, we must return to a freezing winter night in the year 2016. A severe, blinding snowstorm suddenly violently struck the state of Montana. Thousands of exhausted snow geese were desperately migrating south and desperately needed a safe place to land and rest. Through the thick, swirling snow, they spotted what looked like a calm, welcoming lake. They descended from the dark sky. The dedicated human guards could not stop them because the storm was too fierce. By the very next morning, the devastating storm had finally cleared. The tragic, heartbreaking reality was revealed. Nearly 4,000 beautiful white birds were found completely dead floating on the acidic surface. It was an incredibly painful, visible reminder of the sheer destructive power lurking within this water. So here we are, staring directly at an entirely dead, deeply poisonous lake. It is exactly 1 mile wide, dropping down nearly 1,800 feet deep, holding tens of billions of gallons of pure acid. It cannot be treated, filled, or simply ignored. To any normal, rational person, this looks exactly like an inescapable environmental death sentence. But brilliantly curious scientists looked at this exact same toxic hellscape and saw something completely different. We return to that exact same deadly lake, but suddenly, we see highly trained scientists wearing bright yellow protective suits dropping massive specialized filtration bags directly into the poisonous acid. These dedicated experts are not here to clean up the terrible environmental mess. They have actually arrived to carefully harvest an incredibly valuable treasure hiding right beneath the deadly surface. For over 40 continuous years, that highly destructive sulfuric acid has been secretly doing something completely unexpected. It has been slowly dissolving the surrounding solid rocky walls into liquid gold. The intense acid is naturally extracting and concentrating specific heavy elements that the entire modern world is currently desperately hunting for. These are officially known as rare earth elements. We are talking about incredibly complex materials featuring very difficult names like neodymium, praseodymium, cerium, and yttrium. These hidden materials are the invisible backbone of our entire modern civilization. Without these vital elements, you simply cannot manufacture the powerful smartphone currently in your hand. You cannot build advanced electric vehicles or spin massive green energy wind turbines. Currently, more than 90% of the entire global supply of these crucial rare earth elements comes directly from China. The United States has almost zero significant domestic mining operations. This dangerous reliance represents the single largest, most terrifying strategic vulnerability for American national security and future technological development in the 21st century. The ultimate solution might be this pit. Astoundingly, researchers have officially confirmed that all 17 known rare earth elements currently exist entirely suspended within the deeply toxic waters of this massive, supposedly useless, flooded crater. Scientific studies estimate this cursed place could potentially yield up to 40 tons of highly valuable rare earth materials every single year. It is a literal goldmine of modern technology. The National Defense Department has sent top officials here, declaring it one of the most readily available strategic extraction projects in the entire country. They are watching it very closely. Since the year 2020, the Defense Department has aggressively poured over $439 million into securing domestic supply chains, and this toxic pit is the centerpiece. But incredibly, massive amounts of rare earth elements are not the only shocking secret hiding inside this apocalyptic hellscape. There is something else swimming silently in the dark, acidic water. In an intensely hostile environment where absolutely no normal biological organism could ever possibly survive, something truly bizarre has quietly evolved. It evolved in ways previously unseen by modern science. Since the 1990s, a dedicated husband and wife scientific team from the local university has been pulling completely unknown, heavily mutated microorganisms directly out of the toxic green sludge. To survive in this fierce, incredibly highly competitive microscopic war zone, these entirely new species of fungi and bacteria had to evolve incredibly strange, powerful chemical weapons to defend themselves constantly. When scientists carefully isolated these newly discovered toxic compounds and tested them thoroughly inside a sterile medical laboratory, they witnessed something that completely blew their collective minds right open. These heavily mutated chemical weapons, forged entirely in toxic acid, demonstrated a miraculous, unbelievable ability. They could aggressively attack and selectively destroy human cancer cells without harming surrounding healthy tissue. They essentially discovered that the extreme, deadly poison needed to survive the harsh environment acts perfectly as a guided missile targeting highly aggressive tumors. It is a brilliant irony of nature. While moving directly from laboratory tests to functional medical cures takes a very long time, the sheer potential is absolutely staggering. The ultimate cure for cancer might literally come from extreme poison. So let us review this totally insane situation. We currently have a massive pool of deadly acid naturally cooking up strategic national defense materials and potentially miraculous anti-cancer drugs every day. But the truly profound, deeply philosophical question remains: what does this wildly unexpected outcome actually teach humanity about how we view deeply damaged resources and catastrophic environmental mistakes from our past. It absolutely turns out there is another historically damaged, deeply poisoned location situated right here in the very same state that beautifully answers that exact question, but in a completely different way. Located roughly 120 miles west of that toxic pit, another fascinating historical story recently unfolded. It shares the exact same tragic origins of corporate greed and intense heavy metal poisoning. This area suffered greatly from identical copper mining operations, completely choked by dangerous arsenic, silently polluting the local drinking water. But the ultimate ending here is entirely, beautifully different from the dead lake. We are looking at the massive Milltown Dam. Originally constructed back in the year 1907, this imposing concrete wall forcefully blocked the mighty Clark Fork River for a whole century. For 100 continuous years, it trapped over 6.6 million cubic meters of highly toxic, industrially contaminated sediment directly behind its walls. It was a ticking environmental time bomb waiting silently. But in the pivotal year of 2008, local communities made a breathtakingly bold decision. They decided to completely tear down the massive dam and carefully remove the dangerous poison permanently. Enormous, heavy machines painstakingly scooped out millions of tons of incredibly dangerous toxic dirt. They loaded it onto long freight trains, shipping the hazardous waste far away from the delicate river ecosystem forever. Once the artificial concrete barrier was totally destroyed, something truly magical happened. The beautiful Clark Fork River and the wild Blackfoot River finally merged together again for the first time in 100 years. The dark, stagnant water rapidly transformed back into a crystal-clear, fast-flowing natural stream. Almost immediately, resilient native wild fish began eagerly returning to their ancient, historically vibrant underwater breeding grounds. By the hopeful year of 2010, the massive restoration project was officially completed. The previously dead, deeply contaminated industrial wasteland is now beautifully preserved as the incredibly vibrant Milltown State Park. Today, joyful families walk peacefully along scenic river trails where toxic sludge once sat heavily. It stands as a brilliant monument to humanity's incredible capacity to actually heal the deep environmental wounds we inflict. These two incredibly distinct locations rest just 120 miles apart. Yet they perfectly represent two entirely different philosophical endings to the exact same tragic story of reckless human ambition and destruction. Both sites share the very same dark origin of endless greed and devastating environmental consequences left behind by heavily industrialized activity. But the crucial difference is absolutely not the overall scale of physical damage. The profound difference between a permanently dead acidic lake and a deeply healed flowing river is simply the collective decision that human beings intentionally made after the catastrophic damage was already fully done. This is the perfect moment to simply pause and deeply reflect without rushing blindly into quick moral judgments. Let the striking visual contrast perfectly speak entirely for itself in absolute, powerful, cinematic silence. Just imagine the crumbling concrete dam violently falling apart, seamlessly replaced by the stunning image of perfectly clear, incredibly fresh water, freely rushing forward over smooth brown rocks in the warm, glowing sunlight. Now, aggressively contrast that pure image with the bizarre, visually striking neon green acidic lake quietly steaming in the cool evening air. Both represent the deeply permanent legacy of our incredibly heavy industrial footprint. Instead of forcefully preaching a simple moral lesson, this strange duality leaves us pondering open questions. How many other forgotten toxic pits are silently waiting around our vast world for a completely new perspective? How many damaged landscapes are merely waiting for someone visionary to finally see the hidden technological treasure inside them, rather than simply staring sadly at a permanent, horribly ugly environmental scar on the earth? What if the actual boundary separating an unfixable, totally catastrophic disaster and a highly lucrative, entirely untapped opportunity is nothing more than a slight shift in human perspective and 30 years of patient observation? And if human beings are genuinely smart enough to successfully discover advanced anti-cancer medicine floating inside a profoundly toxic lake, what other miraculous hidden solutions are currently disguised as our absolutely biggest problems? Think back deeply to the very beginning of this remarkable story. Do you clearly remember the sudden, deafening sound of those explosive gas cannons repeatedly echoing across the dark water in the cold air? For over 30 long years, dedicated guards have relentlessly fired those loud cannons every single day. Their only grim job was desperately scaring tired migratory birds away to prevent the tragic death from spreading. That was historically the only human activity happening here, a deeply sad defensive battle against a toxic ghost. But fast forward to the groundbreaking year of 2023, and everything changed completely. An entirely new team of brilliant scientific researchers officially began appearing directly on those treacherous rocky shores. For the very first time in modern history, this completely dead lake is actively giving something back. Perhaps the ultimate, most important question we must ask ourselves is not merely how do we easily fix this massive disaster, but rather, what profound, deeply hidden secret is this terrifying disaster desperately trying to tell us about ourselves?